The Young and the Restless spoilers. From the very beginning, Diane Jenkins never fully accepted Claire into her son Kyle's life. It was not simply the protectiveness of a mother watching her only child entangle himself with someone new, nor was it the ordinary skepticism that comes when love arrives too quickly. Diane's resistance came from a deeper instinct, a whisper that something about Claire's presence did not quite add up. She tried every tactic within her reach: subtle persuasion, emotional appeals, even outright disapproval, but Kyle was steadfast in his affection. He saw something in Claire that softened his edges, that gave him hope for stability after years of heartbreak and complicated love affairs. No matter how Diane protested, her son would not let Claire go, and that quiet refusal frustrated Diane in ways she could not ignore. But if there was one thing Diane Abbott had mastered over the years, it was patience. She did not retreat in defeat. Instead, she shifted her focus from opposition to investigation, determined to find a flaw so undeniable that Kyle himself would be forced to see the truth. Diane's suspicions did not emerge from nowhere. She had watched Claire integrate herself into the Newman family with astonishing ease, embraced by Victoria as a daughter despite years of estrangement and scandal. Yet the bond between them never sat right with Diane. The differences in their personalities, the lack of familiar resemblance, and the strained nature of their dynamic all triggered Diane's maternal instincts that something was amiss. To Diane, it seemed less like a reunion of mother and daughter and more like an arrangement, a story too conveniently tied together to be entirely true. Her instincts pushed her to revisit Claire's history, and when she did, she discovered unsettling gaps that no one else appeared to question. Who was Claire before she arrived in Genoa? Why were so many of her formative years shrouded in secrecy? And what role had Jordan, a figure long associated with deception and abduction, played in shaping the life that Claire now claimed as her own? The truth came to Diane like a thunderclap when she uncovered the old accounts of Jordan's actions. Jordan, a woman with a twisted sense of control and cruelty, had kidnapped Claire as a child. Years later, when it suited her, Jordan returned Claire to Victoria as though she were delivering a long-lost heir. But the very idea of Jordan being responsible for reuniting a mother and daughter was too grotesque to believe. Why would someone so consumed by manipulation and revenge suddenly act out of benevolence? Diane knew that Jordan had orchestrated the return for her own purposes, and if Jordan was the architect of this story, then perhaps the story itself was a lie. What if Claire was never Victoria's daughter at all? What if Jordan had placed her in the Newman family for reasons still unknown, weaving deception into their bloodline and destabilizing them from within? It was an accusation so bold that even Diane hesitated to voice it aloud at first. Yet the more she studied, the more she believed it. Her discovery gave Diane the leverage she had been searching for. If she could prove that Claire was not truly Victoria's daughter, then Kyle's relationship would be based on deception, and perhaps the entire foundation of trust between them would crumble. Diane had spent years watching her son get drawn into romantic entanglements that ultimately left him wounded. She had no desire to see Claire become another mistake. More importantly, she could not ignore the instinct that Claire's very identity was a fabrication, and that her presence threatened not only Kyle's happiness, but the balance of power between the Newmans and the Abbotts. With that conviction in her heart, Diane made the decision that would send shockwaves through Genoa City. She went public with her discovery. The announcement landed like an earthquake. Genoa City had always thrived on secrets, betrayals, and dramatic revelations, but Diane's words struck at the very core of the Newman legacy. For years, Victoria had clung to the fragile bond she shared with Claire, enduring suspicion and doubt from others, but holding firm in her belief that she had finally been reunited with the daughter she lost. To have Diane stand before her and assert that Claire was not her child was a devastation almost too cruel to bear. The Newmans, always so proud of their bloodline, were left reeling at the suggestion that Claire was an outsider, someone who had been thrust into their family under false pretenses. For Claire herself, the revelation was shattering. She had already struggled with questions about belonging, her memories of childhood colored by trauma and manipulation. To have her identity torn apart in public by Diane was a humiliation that cut deeper than anything she had endured. Was she truly Victoria's daughter, or had her life been a cruel game played by Jordan at her expense? The questions began to swirl, and though Victoria tried desperately to shield her, the damage had already been done. Every side glance, Every whisper of doubt in Genoa City reminded Claire that she was under a microscope. Her relationship with Kyle, once a source of comfort, now became yet another battlefield. Diane had planted seeds of suspicion in her son's mind, and even if Kyle resisted at first, the doubt could not easily be erased. Diane's motives were, of course, called into question. Some accused her of acting purely out of selfishness, of being unable to let go of her control over Kyle's life. Others, however, recognized that Diane's actions, however ruthless, came from a place of maternal protection. She had survived too much herself, lost too many years to exile and shame, to sit idly by while her son risked everything for a woman whose past was built on shadows. Whether she was right or wrong in her conclusions, Diane acted with conviction, wielding Truther, at least her version of Itas, both sword and shield. Her enemies saw her as manipulative. Her allies saw her as courageous. But no one could deny the impact of her revelation. The fallout rippled across every corner of Genoa City. The Newmans scrambled to defend Victoria's claim, while the Abbotts found themselves reluctantly drawn into the chaos, forced to reckon with the possibility that Kyle's romance could collapse under the weight of lies. Claire herself faced isolation, abandoned by those who had once championed her, now left to question whether she had ever truly belonged anywhere. Jordan, lurking in the background, surely reveled in the destruction, her past sins continuing to poison lives long after she had carried them out. And Diane, standing firm in the eye of the storm, knew she had achieved her aim. She had exposed a weakness, a flaw that could not easily be ignored, and in doing so, she had created the possibility that Kyle would at last walk away from Claire. But as with all things in Genoa City, the truth was not a simple matter of revelation. It was a weapon, and once unleashed, it could not be contained. Whether Diane had uncovered the full reality, or whether she had simply given voice to long-buried suspicions, the world around her had changed irrevocably. Claire's identity would be scrutinized more than ever, Victoria's maternal bond would be tested to its limits, and Kyle would be forced to make a choice between loyalty to the woman he loved and the trust he placed in his mother's instincts. In that crucible of doubt and desire, lives would be reshaped, alliances broken, and the legacy of both the Abbotts and the Newmans altered forever. Kyle Abbott had always been a man torn between loyalty to his family and his desire to live his own life, but when it came to Claire, his heart outweighed everything else. From the moment they came together, Kyle saw in her a chance to rewrite his own story, to carve out a love untouched by the betrayals, schemes, and heartbreak that had haunted his past. It was not about her pedigree or whether she truly belonged in the Newman family. It was about the connection they shared, the way she made him feel understood and less alone. So when Diane publicly tore open Claire's identity, when whispers spread across Genoa City about the possibility that she was not Victoria's daughter at all, Kyle refused to measure their love by bloodlines. To him, Claire was Claire, and that was enough. But even as he tried to hold firm, the shadow of her deception began to gnaw at him. It was not the revelation of her parentage that hurt, it was the lies, the omissions, the way she had allowed him and everyone else to live inside a falsehood when she could have spoken the truth. That betrayal, not Diane's accusations, was the wound Kyle could not easily ignore. Claire's downfall was not a single blow, but a slow erosion. The more Diane's words took root, the more Genoa City turned on her. She was no longer the quiet enigma who had won acceptance through patience and humility. She was branded a fraud, someone who had allowed herself to be passed off as Victoria's daughter when she had known there were questions about her past all along. The love she had cultivated became a target for ridicule. Her place in the Newman family questioned. Her relationship with Kyle painted as opportunistic. People whispered that she had wanted power and status, that she had wrapped Kyle around her finger and manipulated Victoria into embracing her. Whether those accusations were fair or not no longer mattered, as perception became reality, and Claire found herself cornered, despised, and judged by nearly everyone around her. In Genoa City, reputation was everything, and hers had collapsed overnight. For Kyle, the struggle became unbearable. He wanted to believe in her, wanted to cling to the conviction that their love was stronger than the lies. But every time he looked into her eyes, he wondered what else she had kept from him. He had fought so hard for Claire, defied his mother's warnings, defended her against doubters, and now he felt like a fool. The betrayal was not just hers, it reflected on him, on his judgment, on his willingness to ignore signs that Diane had warned him about from the beginning. Anger simmered beneath his devotion, and that conflict tore at his heart. Could he forgive her? Could he rebuild trust with someone who had let him walk blind into humiliation? The questions became louder than the love itself, and Kyle, a man so often ruled by impulse, began to falter under the weight of them. Victoria, meanwhile, was devastated. For years she had clung to the fragile hope that Claire was her daughter, that despite all the horrors and betrayals of the past, she had been given a chance to rebuild something she thought lost forever. To have that bond shattered in public, to be told that Claire was never truly hers, was a cruelty she could hardly endure. Yet Victoria was not a woman to drown in sentiment. She was a Newman, strong-willed and pragmatic, and once Diane's revelations became impossible to ignore, she made the only decision she felt she could. She expelled Claire from the family's home, cutting her off from the protection and comfort of their name. To Victoria, it was not only a matter of betrayal, but of survival. She could not risk her family's empire, could not risk her own emotional stability, on someone who had lived a lie. Whatever affection she had felt was now poisoned, and in a moment of brutal clarity, she cast Claire out. The rejection was absolute and merciless. Claire, who had once dreamed of belonging, who had once believed she had finally found a family and a partner who would never let her go, now stood stripped of everything. The Abbotts did not want her in their circle, the Newmans had closed their doors, and Genoa City itself had branded her as an interloper. She had Kyle's love still, or so she hoped, but even that was slipping through her fingers as his anger grew harder to silence. The irony was crushing. If she had been honest from the beginning, if she had admitted her doubts about her lineage and refused to hide behind Jordan's manipulations, perhaps she could have endured the storm with dignity. But her silence, her decision to live within the falsehood, made her the architect of her own downfall. In the end, Claire's greatest enemy was not Diane or Victoria, it was herself. Her lies had fractured the only relationships that mattered, and now she faced the possibility of losing Kyle as well. He stood before her torn apart, a man who wanted to believe in the woman he loved, but who could no longer trust the ground beneath his feet. Whether he forgave her or walked away, the damage had been done, and the path forward would never again be simple. For Diane, her victory was bittersweet. She had achieved her aim of breaking apart Kyle and Claire, but at the cost of pushing her son into deeper conflict. For Victoria, the loss of Claire was yet another scar on a heart that had endured too many. And for Claire herself, the rejection left her with only one haunting question. Could love survive when built on a lie? Or had she destroyed her one chance at belonging forever?